You know, this subject has been talked about a whole bunch over the years that I never get tired of talking about. Is really just the original rattle trap, the Bill Lewis rattle trap. I got two versions here that I throw. This is a knocking trap that I just took out of the box here. The knocking trap has a much lower pitch rattle to it. You can hear it's more of a thud or more of a thump, where the original trap here, you listen to it, it's a lot more high pitch. It's a lot more nervous. Nervous, not so nervous in the knocking trap. But some instances that I would throw, you know, a knocking trap over, you know, the original high pitch rattle trap like this. In the summertime, like how it is now, fish are usually pretty aggressive when they're feeding on shad. They're almost always feeding on these little bitty shad this time of the year. And nothing mimics a small shad when fish are feeding aggressively better than a 1/4 ounce or 1/2 ounce rattle trap. And there's just so many different ways to fish the rattle trap. You can throw it out, and there's days where just steady winding it back to the boat works good. And then there's days where, you know, you can get really complicated with the technique and how you bring this guy back to the boat. You can get really complicated at how you fish it and all, which is why it's one of the best baits that's probably ever been created. So many people try to knock it off, but I can go into a really deep discussion about colors and so forth, but long story short, crawls, shads, chartreuses. That's all you need when you're talking about throwing a trap. And in this one, I got a shad and I've got a chartreuse in it. But I'll show you some things that I'm looking for, especially when you're talking about summertime fishing, like what we are now. And what I'm looking for, scenarios where I'd like to fish a rattle trap this time of year. Pitching it around docks, just trying to get some top water action. Look, Jacob, look. Look at that first fish in the new boat. Just like that on the old rattle trap. That dude catches fish. You can't fish it wrong, man. That was like 3 casts. I'm supposed to be showing you how to fish it. I'm gonna be honest with you. On this video, I didn't really have any intentions of actually catching fish for you. I was like, oh, I'll bring a couple baits and just show people what I look for. And you can see how easy it is to catch them if you got the right bait. It's just perfect. It catches fish because it looks like fish, like what fish eat. Coosa River spotted bass right there. I was just winding that guy just going down the bank. That's what I was saying about the rattle trap. The reason everybody's caught fish on it, and the reason it's been so popular, you can't fish it wrong. I was just going down the bank on 90%. And Spotted Boo Boo had to come and get it. That being said, I guess we just go down the bank for today. If you're fishing the Coosa River in August, just go in pockets, throw the rattle trap, reel it back to the boat. You will catch fish. It's pretty much how this works. But seriously, how, you know, this fishing with the lipless, it can get as complicated or it can be as simple as you want it to be. One of the things that I've always tried to do with any type of lipless is I like to really contact the structure. This is a little shallow point here, and all it is, I like to keep that thing digging into gravel. I love to throw a rattle trap. You know, it's synonymous for fishing around grass and ripping it through grass, but one of my favorite ways to fish is like on pea gravel banks, really shallow pea gravel banks, even in the summertime. Obviously in the wintertime and during the pre-spawn and springtime during pre-spawn, I like just grinding it down in that gravel, grinding it down in the mud on like nothing banks. Because fish are, a lot of times, they're visual predators, and they can see that really good coming through that open water like that with nothing on the bottom, no sticks, no stumps, no nothing. And a lot of times you can catch one like that. So one thing you can do, don't always look for grass, don't always look for structure, don't always look for stumps. Those real shallow gravel, pre-gravel areas, and just ram that rattle trap into the bottom of whatever you're fishing around. That's one way you can always catch your few fish on the old Bill Lewis original. Retrieve is everything when you're talking about fishing the rattle trap. You know, that's what it's all about. The pump and yo-yo has always got to be good. You know, throw it out to whatever you're fishing, whether that be a ditch, a depression, or ledge, or whatever you're fishing. And you're going to just kind of just rip it off the bottom, let it fall back to the, you rip it off, let it fall back. You see the line stop falling, rip it up, let it fall back. All that's doing is that bait just going falling down. It's just a dying shad. Everybody knows in fishing, fish like to take advantage of prey that's dying. They love that. You already know that. And there's just nothing that you can do better with it than a rattle trap, because it sinks. And that erratic action and bringing it off the bottom, letting it fall back down. Let it fall back down. They just really, fish really like baits. Everything that we fish, even if it's a soft plastic, we move it, make it stop. Move it, make it stop. And you can do the same thing with a rattle trap. You notice the rod that I'm using to fish with right now is fairly long rod. This is a 7.3. I usually use a little bit longer rod when I'm throwing a trap for a couple reasons. I'm typically going to be throwing that bait, you know, as far as I can. If they come up, you know, I want to be able to reach out and touch them if they come out a long distance away from the boat. So I'll use a 7.3, sometimes a 7.6 if I'm fan casting around grass. Other thing, it helps when you're fighting the fish with a little bit longer rod like this. You know, I can really have control of him, especially if I'm using lighter line. If I'm using lighter line, I actually prefer to use a little bit longer rod. I just think you can control the fish a little bit better without trying to put a lot of pressure on them. So I'm going to use that. It's going to be a medium action graphite rod, or I'm going to use a graphite composite or glass rod is what I prefer. Just depends on how the fish are biting. If they're real aggressive, I'm probably going to go with a glass rod. Wintertime when they're real sluggish, not really doing much with the bait, or you know, I'm probably going to use a graphite so I can actually feel the bait and tell what I'm doing. I'm also almost always going to use fluorocarbon, almost always. There's certain scenarios where I will go straight braid on a rattle trap if I'm fishing around grass, because I'm just more efficient that way. But generally speaking, it's always going to be fluorocarbon. Somewhere in the 10 to 12 pound test range is where I'm going to stay at, just depending on what I'm doing with the bait. That just seems to work best for me. This a project that I'm probably most excited about that we worked on at Bill Lewis. I was a part of this project here, the MR6 we came out with. After I've been there a while, we just kind of decided, you know, we really needed a crankbait to get in that mid-range depth. That's something from where I'm from, that's just a deal you use all year long, summer, winter. Obviously, it's better during the spring, but mid-range diving crankbait it just works so well in so many different places. MR6 is a flat-sided crankbait. Sort of reminds me, when I was kind of putting my input on it, I wanted something that was like a balsa plug that I grew up throwing when I was a kid. But I wanted something to throw a little bit better. Balsa plugs are bad about helicoptering in the air when you go to cast them. But I wanted that, but I wanted something that threw better. I wanted something to get just a little touch deeper. So when you're cranking rocks and stuff like that, you can reach down and touch that structure a little better. So I won a lot of money on this bait this year. You didn't hear a lot about it at Lake Seminole tournament I won. First day I caught almost all of my fish, 19 pounds on this bait. Then I took it the very next tournament down at Grand Lake and caught them again on the MR6. So I'm just like I did with the original trap, I'm just going to show you what I like to do with it, what I like to look for when I'm thinking about throwing the MR6, and you know, my setup, my rod and reel setup. And so hopefully it'll make you kind of open your eyes to some places that you can fish this bait in, and help you catch some fish too. We all want to catch fish. I like catching fish. Don't you like catching fish? I love catching fish. I love going to the dentist too. That's why I bite my line all the time. It's crankbait dynasty right here in front of me. Most of the time when I'm cranking, now I don't know how much water is over here. I'm fishing a body of water that I'm very unfamiliar with. But anytime I see riprap, I pull it out. I'm like, remember how Matt Lee was on the Strike King commercial when he was like, I just tie one on. I just tie one on every time I see riprap. I put my crankbait in my hand. No matter if it's a square bill or if it's a mid-range diving crankbait. My hands start shaking a little bit when I start seeing riprap. So I saw this, I saw this coming down the river just a bit ago. You see, anytime you got a corner on a riprap, that's gonna be good. But you got a couple corners here. Anytime you got boulders sticking out on the riprap, that's a good place to throw a crankbait. So I'm just gonna get up here, and I like to get real close to it, parallel the riprap, and try to see if I can run that crankbait in as many rocks as I can. I like to try to count rocks with it, basically what I'm doing. I kind of feel my bait back to the boat, get up there. Since this is a 6-foot diving crankbait, I'm gonna try to get up there and make sure when that, I hit the 4 to 6 foot range as much as I can when I'm cranking. So something like this is what dreams are made of right here. Dreams are made of. I got a whole stretch of it. I'd like to think this little corner right here would probably be the hot spot. It feels like it's pretty deep too. You kind of lipped crankbait because your cast and your angle has a lot to do with a couple things. How long your bait stays in the strike zone. It has a lot to do with how you hit the structure. If I was off of this riprap 2 boat lengths, 40 foot or so, 30 or 40 foot, number one, I wouldn't keep my bait in the strike zone very long, and I also wouldn't actually hit the rocks. You want to be running that crankbait into the rocks, because those fish are sitting down in there, those little gaps and crevices and holes in the rocks, just waiting to kind of ambush and root around looking for crawdads and stuff like that. So your boat position I would say it's more important when you're throwing a crankbait. Even if it's a square bill or shallow diving crankbait, is more important than your setup, your rod, your reel, your line, or even, I'd go as far as to say even more important than what kind of crankbait you're throwing. Obviously, like I mentioned, I like to crank around rocks. If I see rocks, the first thing I'm gonna pull out, it's not gonna be a jig, it's not gonna be shaky head. If I see rocks like this, I'm gonna pull out my crankbait first. That's gonna be the first bait I'm gonna throw. Depending on how deep it is, I may grab our Echo 175, or like this one that has a good bit of water on it. It's got 8 or 10 foot of water on it. I'm probably going to grab my MR6. And you can see how I'm fishing it here. Slow retrieve most of the time. As I mentioned, I try to count the rocks. I want to count every one rock I feel that bait climbing over. I'm gonna get real close to the bank like that and throw down it. The reason I get close and throw down it, let's say I'm starting to realize that the fish are in that 2 to 3 foot zone. All I do is cast a little bit closer to the bank. If I find out, they kind of step down, they're a little bit down, a little bit deeper. All I do is just bump my cast out, 5 foot, and then all of a sudden now I'm hitting that 4 to 6 foot zone. So that's why I like to parallel. I can really manipulate what side of the riprap that I'm hitting, how deep I'm hitting, very easily. When I'm fishing the MR6, I'm using almost always 6-4-1 gear ratio reel. Very rarely will I go much over 12-pound test. Usually it's gonna be 10-pound test. I usually won't go under 10-pound test. I don't really get too much into line size, especially shallow cranking. Typically your casts aren't long enough to where line size is gonna make a huge difference in how deep the bait's getting. You've already heard me mention colors when I was talking about the original Rattle trap. Quite honestly, my thought process on colors when it comes to the MR6 is pretty similar. I'm just going to use, when I'm fishing stain water, I use chartreuse or red. When I'm fishing clearer water, clearer that's not clear but not muddy, it's gonna be probably shad pattern, or it just depends on what they're feeding on. I don't really get much outside of that. My favorite color out of the Bill Lewis lineup is that tree that I just threw in. My favorite color out of the Bill Lewis lineup is going to be probably the chartreuse blaze. I use that in clear, dirty, or in between. All that is chartreuse with black back. This particular color I'm using right now is called Louisiana Shad. And I like to use any of our crawl colors. We have really good crawl colors at Bill Lewis. The strawberry crawl, any of those red shads or the Rayburn crawls, you know, those, that's honestly just about all I use. So Bill Lewis MR6, it's a good crankbait. You know, we've had the rattle trap for years. You guys are familiar with that. We've got a bunch of new stuff coming down the pipe. The new SB56, make sure you check that one out. The Stutter Steps, great top water baits. Bill Lewis just has a bunch of good crankbaits. They've been building baits for over 50 years and I think they know a little bit about catching fish, so stick with us. We'll catch a lot of fish on the Bill Lewis stuff that's coming down the pipe. Go right here. I got him, Jacob. Watch me put that big old 9-pound spotted bass in this boat. Right there.